When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
Hello, I'm Arnold. This is Somewhere on Earth, and it's Tuesday, the 4th of February, 2025. I'm in London, and we have guests from the UK and the US. Joining me today is Alice. Welcome to the show.
Hi Arnold, how are you? We have quite a show for you today. We will be talking about the AI and the job market. Could AI replace us? What do you think?
Not yet, I hope.
Where am I? Oh, geez. I think I've just been having a nightmare. Oh my goodness. I just dreamt that somebody took my job. Not even a somebody, an AI. Producer Ania. I'm freaking out here. Oh my goodness. Let me just compose myself here. Oh, that was horrible. Ania, I've just had this awful nightmare. Are you there?
Yeah, I am. I'm getting a little bit worried, but I had that dream too.
You had it too?
Yeah, I thought I'd been replaced by an AI that sounded so much better than us.
They sounded really plausible. Because the thing is, there was this like man voice and then a woman voice, almost like me, and then you. And it was, it's horrible.
It is.
Oh, I'm only just getting over it.
Right, my heart rate is slowing.
Okay.
Right,
well,
I think we can start the show now.
Let's start the show. All right, I think I'm okay. Full professionality now restored. And it's just as well because guess what today, folks? We are going to be asking this question. Is AI coming after your job too? Well, if you work in the likes of machine learning or chatbot development, then guess what? Your prospects are pretty good. And in fact, they're getting even better. It's less good news if you're a translator or in certain kinds of writing jobs. Now, these are the conclusions of some fascinating work that's just been published in the Journal of Economic Behaviour and Organisation. To gauge then what generative AI means for jobs, since 2019, these researchers have been categorising over 3 million job postings on a global freelancing platform. And that's given them a rich data set that's charted the demand for different skills across the jobs market and how the advent of Gen AI has affected that demand. The researchers gauged which skills that AI is either replacing or complementing or not affecting at all. Well, I caught up with two of these researchers, Dr. Fabian Braesemann from the Oxford Internet Institute, which is part of the University of Oxford, and Dr. Ole Tuetloff of the Copenhagen Centre for Social Data Science. So we started on, well, kind of where the study started, really, back 5 years ago, when few would have had any idea of the events that were about to shape the world of work.
I think in the public discourse there has been a lot of panic that these models, like we are seeing so much progress and it's so fast, and soon the all human work will be like replaced by clever and smart machines. And I think the progress has been fast, but our study shows that these claims or these fears are not quite justified. What we find is that, yes, ChatGPT has replaced jobs in the online freelancing world, but it has also created new jobs. So this is very much in line with what happened in past waves of technological change. And at the same time, I would want to stress that still, if we are talking about one quarter, like 25% almost less demand in the substitutable skill cluster. And this in only 1.5 years. So there is a substantial drop in demand. And I think what we think is really important at the moment for policymakers to look at is to closely monitor this speed of progress. Like, where are we heading? Because technological change is, of course, a challenge for workers, for employers, and in the end for politicians and society at large. But in my opinion, it's very important to consider like the speed of progress. Are we talking about a major transition of the labor market over the next 5 to 10 years? Or is it more the next 30 to 50 years? This makes a big difference because all the institutions in, let's say, the educational system is like slow. And so if we have to like deal with a major transformation over the next 10 years, that's very different from if we have more time.
Yeah, and I can see that you're understandably keeping that question open. It doesn't sound as if you're about to answer which one of those you think we're going to see. But I wonder if from this, it might mean that there are winners and losers. So let's say it happens really quickly, then my intuition is that the more legacy economies and countries and sectors are going to really struggle. That would seem to follow. But this could be a big win, for instance, like regions like Africa, for instance, where you have a young, mobile population and rapid adoption across many parts of the continent of Africa of technology. Any thought on that?
Maybe looking into the most recent developments, probably. So looking into the most recent developments, we have seen the new model from China, DeepSeek, being developed as just a fraction of the cost that the original development of ChatGPT was in terms of costs, also investment needs for that. So we're seeing a change there. There's a rapid development of new adaptations, new applications, new software within the AI scope. And this is something we have seen in the past as well. Think of the car, the car was a luxury thing until the assembly line and Taylorism, John Ford made it a mass product. And only then the economy really started to change from an railway focus towards a car and street focus with all the development that came after that. So surely we're going to see big transformations. I don't think we need for that to speculate more about the cognitive ability of AI in the future, whether it will be a super intelligence or not. That's actually not something we need to worry about much right now. What is out there at the moment is the quick spreading and diffusion of AI models in many parts of the economy. And you are very right, this will have geographical implications in different places. I want to say, only because Europe was not first really to develop these models, this is not necessarily a bad thing. As we are seeing now, this Chinese model is claimed to have costed only around 5% in development cost than the original model. So who knows how costs will develop further. Probably these will go down, at least the fixed cost for development. We don't know yet about the marginal cost, that is the cost of actually running these tools, but it could very well be envisaged that big corporations, think of the car manufacturers, think of telecommunications operators or any big corporation, might soon start to develop their own GPT like AI software and use it within their own ecosystems or public sector organizations. So I'm thinking it is much more likely, with the given capability that we're having, that we see many more markets appearing, many more products appearing, that in one way or the other use AI to make the workforce or processes more efficient and more productive, and at the same time develop new things. And this can have many geographical implications. However, I think there will not be a liberation from other, let's say, enabling forces of the economy. We have seen that in remote work as well. Just because everyone started to be able to work remotely thanks to Zoom and other digital infrastructures being enabled and integrated for the workforce throughout the pandemic, it was not that all the jobs disappeared in the big cities. In contrast, urbanization is still going on and we see higher rents than ever in the big metropolitan areas of the world. So I'm not thinking that traditionally disadvantaged economic regions will necessarily be able to leapfrog. However, I'm thinking we will see a much more widespread distribution of AI models in all parts of the global economy.
Yeah, and so you think that DeepSeek, which is, I assume, it's appeared really between you submitting your paper for publication and now coming onto the media and talking about it, it shows how quickly things are happening. And if all the claims for DeepSeek are founded, and it'll take some time, I think, for us to be absolutely sure, but if they are, it seems that we're having a really fundamental and profound shift in the economics of AI, and that can only speed up the trends that you've already been analysing and reporting on since the beginning of the research in 2019. Bit of a yes or no on this because we're pushed for time, but what's your thought?
My impression is yes and no. On the one hand, it being open source, I think is very powerful in the sense that what Fabian mentioned, that I think around the world, there are very few AI labs that can actually develop frontier models, but there are many more people who can use these models as a foundation to then build additional innovative products of all sorts. And I think we are going to see much more of them. But I wouldn't quite say that only DeepSeek being like cheaper and achieving the same quality changes everything. I still think that we will see the most advanced models probably for at least the next 1, 2, 3 years coming from like the more traditional AI labs in the US. But still, you're quite right that I think there will be a lot of like adaptation now. Also in the US labs, there's a lot of pressure on them to actually show that all of these billions of dollars going into them is paying off and will pay off over the next years.
Fabian Braesemann and Ole Tuetloff. So, Ania, listening to that, very interesting and very timely research. Good news for some, less good news for others, I suppose, but you could say that about lots of different studies. So, just to add a little bit of value here, what did you make of it?
Well, I mean, you do look online and you're bombarded with this survey says, that survey says about job security. And it's very difficult to determine which is which one to pick, really, I suppose. But there does appear to be a correlation between using artificial intelligence and concerns about job security. And it seems that the more workers use generative AI in their jobs, the more likely they fear that automation may replace them, obviously. So according to a December 2023 CNBC SurveyMonkey workforce survey, 60% of employees who use AI regularly reported they worry about its impact on their jobs. 72% of respondents who use the technology recognise that automation significantly increases productivity. And Goldman Sachs predicted in 2022 that AI would replace or diminish 300 million jobs. Now, the investment bank predicts that the growth in AI will mirror the trajectory of past computer and tech products. Obviously, that's 2022, and things have significantly moved on, even this week in AI. So, we have to take, I think, a lot of this stuff with a bit of a pinch of salt because we're not really sure how things are going to evolve.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that, really. And as you rightly said, things can just suddenly happen. You have some results from 2022. If those results had come out even, say, 3 weeks ago, it'd have gone, yeah, fine. And it's just literally in the days, really, isn't it, since we had the DeepSeek kind of revelation, as it were, that it appears that AI can be done a lot cheaper than perhaps some of the more kind of established, very large-scale LLMs might have made us think. And I suppose my prediction, which is a very easy prediction to make, is that we're just going to keep having these shocks, aren't we? I mean, let's just suppose, even like hypothetically, even if it turned out that DeepSeek had pulled some kind of fast one or they'd stolen models or whatever, even if that were the case, then we're only a few weeks away from yet another AI coming up and people go, yeah, this one really is proving that you can do this stuff much more cheaply, and then it rewrites the whole kind of book, if you like, as if there's even a book already of what we think about AI and its effects.
Indeed, and I think really it's only going to be humans slowing down this advancement, isn't it, as we have to learn these new things. And some people just get it and can use it, and it's fantastic. Other people do struggle to understand how to get the best out of it.
Yeah, sure. And it was quite interesting because that little playful beginning that we had at the start of the show, which turned into a complete nightmare for me.
And me.
And you. But there is a slightly reassuring story for people like us there, isn't it? Because you did set out to try and actually clone our voices. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted somebody that sounded like me and somebody that sounded like you to start the podcast. And you couldn't do it, could you? So why not?
It's because our budget doesn't stretch that far quite. So I couldn't find a free one, right?
Oh, all right.
And, I really wanted to see what was like really easily accessible out there without having to have that restriction of putting my credit card number in. You remember Sian did this in the Strettons podcast. We heard about that a few weeks ago. She was interviewing a Ukrainian lady who had started a baking business, and her English was very basic, which just wouldn't work for the interview. So Sian recorded some words into an AI voice cloner and ran the interview, which was a recipe for one of the lady's cakes in English. So she literally translated the Ukrainian into English again using a computer.
Yes,
and then use another bit of tech to get the actual interview. And the audience didn't appear to notice. So I'm hoping none of our audience get any ideas that they can do the same with us. We'll find us somewhere on Earth, the Global Tech Podcast, on a platform soon. And it'll be you and our studio experts. Please don't get any ideas.
Yeah, please do not do that, folks. Yes. But then, of course, we've got to be careful that we're being a bit, say, English language centric. And also the way that we speak English is in a kind of fairly received English kind of way. I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but you'd probably put yourself in that category, Anya. We've worked for the Beeb for a while. We speak in a certain way. So not all voices are created equal, are they? Or necessarily represented equally by the voice cloning AIs?
Yeah, absolutely. I just wonder what an AI would make after I spent a few weeks in Nottingham with my mum again. And
the accent came out there.
It did a little bit, but it really would do after a few pints in the pub with my mates. But that kind of took me back to what Wairimu was saying about Kiswahili and the subtlety of the differences in the language between countries. So she was talking a lot about Tanzania and a lot about Kenya and the different style of language. And also, the difference between what young people talk, the sheng, the slang, and what older people say. Now, AI is not at a stage to be able to tell the differences between some of these changes in accent and colloquialisms. And I do think it will get much better at this, but will it be able to keep up with the evolution of a living language? I'm not sure. I mean, my girls came home the other day and I said, "Oh, go on, spill the tea. What happened at school?" And they just looked at me going, just don't, Mama, just don't. And I assume you know what spill the tea means, Gareth.
Well, isn't it spill the beans?
Yeah, spill the beans, yeah. But it's spill the tea, gossip,
Oh,
But
I see. So you say it in a different way. And that's your point then?
Yeah, so will an AI know what's the gossip is one simple way of saying it. Spill the beans, perhaps, is how our generation would say it. And what's the tea, or spill the tea? Will the language model know the difference, or know that they are in effect the same thing? And I can see that perhaps maybe in English or French or German, that will get much better, but I think it still leaves a lot to be desired. I know when I see translations in Polish, and I couldn't comment on other languages, my French I'm not a native speaker in French, so I don't want to comment on that, but I don't think it's good enough still to do those translations really, really well.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that scenario like in the future where you might have a care bot, for instance, and part of its duty might be making tea for you, and it's got a conversational LLM built in. So you'd say, "Oh, go on, care bot, spill the tea. What do you know about such and such a thing?" And it would literally just get halfway through making a cup of tea and then spill it on the floor, saying, "Well, you've commanded me to do this." Might write that into a sitcom.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think it's quite there yet. But there's going to be lots more about this in the podcast extra version of the show from Ole and Fabian. So if you haven't subscribed, please go to pod.fan. Search for our podcast somewhere on Earth, the Global Tech Podcast, and subscribe. It's only $10 a month. I think they really put their research into context there.
And just think, if we get enough subscriptions, we can afford that voice cloning software.
We could, yeah. We could be out for jobs. So if you really want to get rid of us, please do subscribe.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking actually that, we can just press the auto podcast button and then spend the rest of the afternoon in the pub. It makes our business very scalable. And happy days all round. So there we are.
Indeed.
But assuming we still have to graft away and actually do this the old-fashioned way, which is terribly time-consuming, what might listeners be looking forward to? Do we have a few little things coming up?
We do. Trail ahead notice. So Gillian Boddington will be back in a few weeks' time, and she's going to be looking at AI and education. Now, many schools are developing AI policies, but the examinations are still way behind. There's no AI use in the UK official exams at the moment, yet many pupils are using it, and surely we should be teaching how to use it responsibly, especially as most of today's pupils will be using it when they join the workforce. And it is hard to change an official examination. It takes a long time to change the syllabus and to teach it, etc. But I think that education systems around the world are going to have to start adapting a lot quicker than they have been, because the tech is completely outpacing the current methods.
Okay, well now let's have the second report from our special correspondent. But that's a very grand made-up title, really. But you know what I mean? There's a reporter who's going up and he's doing some special work for us. So let's call Jez, our special correspondent. He's been tracking down the very best tech for good stories from the Consumer Electronics Show.
Hello, it's Jez Donaldson here again. It's a long-held belief that blind people just can't use maps, even to the extent that here in the UK, maps are exempt from accessibility legislation. Brandon Biggs has changed all that. Brandon is the totally blind founder and CEO of XR Navigation, makers of Audiom, the world's first inclusive map viewer. I interviewed Brandon at CES Las Vegas. In the interview, he explains the technology, why he developed it, what kind of customers the company has, and how they're using it. Let's dive in.
My name is Brandon Biggs, and I am the CEO of XR Navigation. We build the world's first inclusive visual, auditory, and text-based map viewer and editor. It's fully accessible to people who are illiterate, with mobility impairments, or who are totally blind, and anyone else, and makes geographic information fully usable to everyone.
So your product is called Audiom, that's right? So tell us a bit more about that.
Audiom is a fully accessible digital map viewer and editor. The visual experience is what you would expect from a map, except it allows low vision users to zoom in up to 200% without squashing interface elements, adjust the border width of features to make them easier to see, switch between using patterns or colors if you're colorblind, and access the interface fully through the keyboard. The non-visual experience is very similar to a video game, where users hear the name and sound of objects as they move a character over them with their arrow keys, touchscreen, or other controller. For example, Fillmore Street and a concrete footstep. So using these different types of conventions, people who are blind in particular are able to fully access the information that is on a map, like the shape, size, distance, direction of all the different types of points, polygons, and lines on a map.
Can you talk about a couple of interesting use cases? I noticed one of your clients is NASA. Maybe you could, if you're allowed to, you could tell us a little about that and maybe one other.
Yeah, so we did the campus for NASA JPL, and they had a basically an inaccessible map on their website, and they said, can you make this accessible? And we said, sure. They handed us some data they had of their campus, some geographic data, and we put that into Audiom, and we made the map fully accessible. The use case of that is if somebody is going to visit the campus and they have one of the many disabilities or are illiterate or whatever type of person who can't use a map, about 20% of the population can't use a geographic map in their current format, then they can fully access the NASA JPL map. Another use case was a conference that we did, the Great 2024 conference in Phoenix, Arizona. This was a group of blind conference organizers. And so basically they were organizing a conference like the Consumer Electronics Show, and they needed a way to preview the space before they actually went there in person. And so they used Audiom to preview the space and then look at the booth layout when they got that to understand where the different booths were. we actually embedded that map into their website, and so when the visitors actually got onto their website, they were able to preview the space with all the booth names and go and look at the exhibitor directory and learn where the restrooms were in relationship to the different booths. And since a lot of the attendees were disabled, they were able to fully access this map.
Which geographies do you sell into, and are there any geographies that you could not sell into for regulatory or other reasons?
We do all different types of maps, so it's not just navigation maps. We also do like election result maps and weather maps, COVID statistic maps, any kind of thematic or referential map. So, if a lot of cities, for example, have hundreds and hundreds of layers on top of their maps, and we can do those types of maps just fine. We also partner with existing digital map tools, like we're working to try and get into places, like Google Maps or Esri, to make their maps accessible.
So I believe Audiom is your first product. Do you have others in the pipeline?
Our ultimate vision is to make a fully inclusive navigation solution. So we've got an interactive 3D model bronze map that we've installed in the Magical Bridge Playground in Palo Alto, California. And if you go there, you can touch the different objects. They're 3D model of the playground, so all the different objects you can actually feel. If you touch them, there will be a speech, voice message coming out of a speaker that's above you, and it'll tell you what that object is, and if you keep holding your finger there, it will tell you about that object. So it'll say something like disc spinner. The disc spinner is a disc that you stand on and it spins, that kind of thing. And then we also do a turn-by-turn navigation application. We partner with a couple different companies like Good Maps and Next to do different types of turn-by-turn navigation applications in a facility.
That's Brandon Biggs. He's with XR Navigation. He was telling Jez all about Audiom there, and very interesting to hear as well. Jez Donaldson with that report. And Ania, what did you make of that?
Well, I think I found it quite impressive, actually, because I think this is certainly going to really help people familiarise themselves with new spaces and for some very overwhelming environments. Now, imagine if you are starting a new job. It's pretty scary. If you're starting university for the first time, you're going to a new place. Healthcare facilities, if you're going in for an appointment or maybe some surgery to a new hospital where you've not been before, you've got the worry of, seeing the doctor and what they're going to say or what they're going to do, but you've also got to find the place, the right clinic, and that can be quite daunting. But imagine doing that if you are blind and you can't read the signs or go to the map and see the big red arrow that says you are here. I think this will be not only useful for blind people, but also for people who have some neurodiversities. Now, if you think about ADHD, that can sometimes overwhelm people, cause panic in new places. They don't want to go to certain places like that. Dyslexia. Now, if you have a new place name to read, if it reads it for you, it's going to be much easier. But even dyscalculia, so if you have a map and distances are included, it's going to calculate stuff for you correctly. And the dyscalculia, many people often find there's very basic number calculations are the problem as opposed to the more complex number problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just the power of audio as well, because, I was checking out some YouTube videos, as you often do when you're trying to visualize what some technology looks like. So I looked it up, and there's some really nice examples there of how the Audiom environment, it creates a soundscape that you move through. And in this case, I don't know if it was probably not the map that was necessarily creating that environment, and maybe it was a simulation of that environment to demonstrate what the map can do. But nonetheless, it reminded me of, even as somebody who is sighted, in my case, I thankfully am, where, I moved the environment largely using my eyes, but I've really discovered in the last few years just how useful and valuable audio is for navigating around spaces. And just as a really quick example, I often go to Venice. It's one of my favourite places on the place of the planet, but it's infuriating to have to navigate around Venice. I've been there loads of times and I still get completely lost. But the way I found to really navigate around Venice is to put on one of the mapping apps. It just happens that Apple Maps seems to work well for me. And I just have it on audio, and I just use the audio directions to get me from A to B in Venice. And for some reason, I just can use that so much more effectively than trying to keep looking down at the map and bumping into lots of tourists. It's fantastic.
Even simple things like driving, if you have the audio instructions, you're not constantly looking at the screen, or if you haven't got an inbuilt screen, looking at your phone to say, where am I going next? It's like, turn at the next junction, turn left, or at the roundabout, take the third exit. It is much, much easier. Now, there are over 30 million publicly facing maps, according to the XR Navigation website, and they're only visuals, so they're not accessible to blind or dyslexic users. And that is going to make a significant difference for so many people. And the other interesting thing is that Jez mentioned that Brandon, who we heard there, is blind. Now, the CTO and co-founder, Chris Toth, is also blind, which is why I think this product seems so good. Now, maybe one of our listeners could tell us. Maybe we should run it past someone like Fern Lulham, one of our reporters who is blind herself, and see what she thinks, because I think it works really well. Obviously, I'm not blind. I have dyslexia, though, so I can see that aspect of it. But they seem to really know what's going to make it work well.
Lovely. I think so. Ania, thank you. So that'll do us. So, dear listener, we'd love to know what you think on the generative AI issue, and especially how much you use AI in your own work or life, and just in general. And I know you're about to shout back at me, we all use it, because even if you just do a web search, that's AI. So I get that. Of course, there's just the AI that's just built into just about everything we use these days. But I'm talking specifically if you use like an LLM, if you just to summarize reports, or to help you with your assignments if you're a student, just all the stuff you can probably imagine. But it'd be amazing if you perhaps have a few surprising uses that we haven't thought of yet. And I'll give you one for free. I will hold my hands up right here and say that I have attempted to use some of these Gen AIs to help me summarize research papers and then turn them into questions for an interview. And Anya, you'll be reassured here that it doesn't work very well in that place. If I'd have done interviews based on AI generated questions, a lot of them would have gone horribly wrong, because it's quite interesting. Whether the AI is hallucinating, I'm not too sure, but there might be some kind of nuance in a research paper that the AI hasn't quite got, and then it will frame a question that is entirely kind of ignorant of that nuance. And if the question were asked in exactly the way that the chatbot had suggested, would end up taking you into a place where you really missed the point of the story, and the contributor would probably say, actually, Gareth, that's exactly what our research isn't saying. So I'm quite capable of making up my own bad questions without having to get an LLM to do it for me. So
I can imagine the editing I'd have to do with that. That would be a nightmare.
Just imagine. So for me, it hasn't given me a shortcut to briefing for interviews. So here's another part of the question then. So, where have you used like a generative AI and just found that you can't trust it? Or maybe a situation where I found myself now, where I continue to try to use it to summarize research papers, to formulate interviews, but because I just don't have any confidence that it's going to give me a good set of questions, I then go back through and double check all the questions, do everything manually, and realize I may as well have just done it all myself in the first place.
It saved yourself a lot of time, really.
I may as well have done. So, dear listener, what do you think about that? I'd love your similar experiences. You can email us hello@somewhereonearth.co. You can find us on any of the socials. We are not as active at all really on X anymore, for reasons that you'll understand, but you can find us everywhere else, like on Blue Sky. We're over there now. And WhatsApp code 44 74 86 329 484. We are with the Evergreen Podcast Network. Our editor, producer, and this week's, you don't like it when I say expert, do you, Anya, really? But, presenter's friend, whatever you want to be called.
I'm just a bit of a hack, really.
This week's hack has been Anya. The production manager is Liz, and I'm Gareth. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. It's Michael Calore, Director of Consumer Tech and Culture at Wired, here with my colleagues, senior writer Lauren Good.
Hello.
And Wired contributor Zoe Schiffer.
Hey, everyone.
We're here to tell you about our new podcast, Uncanny Valley, a show about the people, power, and influence of Silicon Valley.
Every week, we get together to talk about how technology and culture from the Valley is influencing our everyday lives.
We dig into questions like, will we ever get our privacy back? Is OpenAI for real? And how are Silicon Valley billionaires impacting U.S. elections?
The first episode of Uncanny Valley comes out on October 31st. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.